would like to begin the afternoon session today with another very international panel. And in this discussion, the speakers will talk about gastronomy, tourism, and technology with a focus on product design, marketing, and customer relations. So here to moderate the session is Mr. Damian Serrano. Mr. Serrano holds a doctorate in geography and tourism intelligence, is an expert in innovation, product management, and tourist destinations. His current position is Director of Project Laboratory of Tourism of the Barcelona Provincial Council. And joining Mr. Serrano on stage, I would like to invite Mr. Stephen Joyce, CEO of Resco Canada, Mr. Kimmy Liu, Director of C-Trip Gastronomy Department, China, Ms. Sarah Matthews, Head of Destination Marketing of TripAdvisor China, and Mr. David Fiedler, Director of Experience Design of ICF Olsen Canada. Mr. Serrano, all yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you half after lunch. Hope the people will come little by little to listen to this interesting roundtable that is ready to start. On my left side, I have Mr. Stephen Joyce. He's the CEO and co-founder of Resgo, a leading reservation platform for the tours and activities segment. He was the chair of the Open Travel Alliance for 5 years, and he's a regular contributor for the News.com, a leading travel technology media company, and he speaks regularly about technology, about social media, about tourism in quite international conference. So we're honored that you have here. Please, giving the floor to you. Here we are.
Great. So I want to talk to you today about culinary tourism in the scope of the global state of experiences in general. And by experiences, I mean in-destination experiences, tours and activities, so things that people do when they get to a destination. So I'm not talking specifically about restaurants, I'm not talking specifically about bars, but I'm talking about the experiences that may include those components. So first of all, I want to share the size and scope of the tour and activity market, so what we now call as experiences in general. According to Focusrite, who did a recent study in 2017, it was actually their third of 3 studies, global study, about the tours and activity space. It's valued at about $129 billion US globally. Now, the important thing about that is that culinary tourism, according to WFTA, is about 25% of that value. So the food tourism component of that is about $32 billion. Tours and activities, destination experiences in general, is actually the 3rd largest segment of the travel industry after hotels and airlines. So it's actually larger than car rental, than cruise, and the other components of what we would consider to be the travel industry. Now, Asia Pacific in general makes up about 30% of that, which makes it actually the largest region for tour and activity spend in the world. So Southeast Asia in general is a really important component of that. What's interesting about the Asia market compared to Europe and North America is when we look at the average spend, when we take that 25% number, we've heard the number 30% thrown around. We've heard other numbers as well. It varies based on the destination itself, the regional destination. In slightly less expensive markets, it's around 17%. In more expensive markets, it goes up to about 30%. So we like to use the 25% as sort of a reach there. Most of the customers that are coming and doing these tours and activities, these experiences in destination, are travelers. They're not locals. There has been a lot of focus recently on things for locals to do. But what we find is that over 80% of the customers that are spending money in destination are international travelers. And in Asia, that could be domestic travel, and by domestic travel I mean between countries in Asia. and international customers, primarily from North America and from Europe. Culinary travelers spend more than your average, because they tend to look for specific, unique culinary experiences. So 82% of culinary travelers spend more on food and drink when they travel than they do even at home. So they're looking for those experiences. They're willing to spend money in destination on those experiences. How are they finding these experiences? How are they looking for these culinary experiences? We talked about the 4 stages of travel: the dreaming, planning, going or booking, and sharing or reminiscing are kind of the 4 steps. When we look at the dreaming stage, the dreaming part comes with looking at videos online, looking at images, eating at restaurants locally in your market, and then wanting to experience the full culture based on the experiences that you have at local restaurants. So I love the idea of Indonesian restaurants being branded as a whole, kind of globally, being ambassadors for their country and their culture, which is a really neat idea. 95% of travelers start their destination planning with an online search. So generally, that's with Google. So they're entering in search terms in Google, and that's how they're doing their searching. So if you're wondering how people are starting their planning online, they're doing it with search. Reviews are important. 40% of travelers read reviews from other travelers. So we heard from Google earlier about local reviews being not as relevant for travelers than reviews from travelers themselves. This kind of really highlights that we're talking about travel reviews from other travelers are the ones that are most relevant. Most of these experiences are booked online. Offline, rather. And what I mean by offline is that they're generally booked with the operator in destination. Only 19% of travelers book online, and in APAC, it's only 11%. Part of the reason for that is because most of these experiences are not available online. Most of these experiences, they don't have reservation systems, they don't have websites. A lot of them, all they have is a mobile phone, and that's pretty much it. Especially in markets like Southeast Asia and South America and some of the other markets, it's very difficult to find these products online. When we look at other sources for bookings, online travel agencies, so what are referred to as OTAs, a very, very small market. So the Expedias and the Viators, or TripAdvisor Experiences as they're called now, all of these OTAs are actually a very, very small part of the overall booking volume for these experiences. They only account for about 3% globally. Most of the bookings are done directly with the businesses in destinations. So you're working with locals in destinations. Mobile is very important. 70% of travelers use their mobile phones when they're in destination. So once they get into the destination, they're looking on their mobile phones and doing searches for local experiences and for those culinary experiences on their mobile phones when they're in destination. And that's really become relevant now with global roaming and with the accessibility of cellular data when you're traveling. You're not tethered to a Wi-Fi hotspot or a coffee shop or things like that. And lastly, travelers love to share, and especially food. We heard about the fellow whose Instagram is only food. That's not uncommon. Hashtag food on Instagram is actually one of the top 30 tags on Instagram. And currently, although this is already old, there's 170 million posts on Instagram with hashtag food. So people are sharing their food experiences on platforms like Instagram. So it's imperative that as individual operators, as destinations, that you take a look and see what is happening around your destination, around those hashtags, and use that to market the destinations. And that's it. Thank you very much. If you'd like to connect with me afterwards or online, there's my credentials. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we put on the picture quite accurate numbers. We need also numbers to define the main dimension of what we're talking about. So thank you very much, Stephen, for that. Next speaker is Mr. Kimi Liu. He's the director of City Trip Gastronomy Department in China. Kimi began to lead the City Trip Gourmet that provides the gourmet restaurant recommendations in more than 150 major cities throughout the world of Chinese travelers. City Trip is a well-known super platform based in China with more than 30,000 employees. So we are very expecting to see your message in your presentations. Thanks to be here.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Today, I want to give you a brief introduction about what is City Trip Gourmet. I think most of you have heard of City Trip before, and because we are right now we are the #2 largest online travel group in the world after Priceline, which is also one of our largest stakeholder. And City Trip was founded in 1999, and it has been almost 20 years. But City Trip Gourmet was started from 2016, and it only have about 2 years old. So I want to talk about who we are, what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. So this is who we are and why we do it. Why we are trying to build a new small business like City Trip Gourmet, because this market is almost fully occupied by Sarah and TripAdvisor. Because it's all started from a small idea. Because since we are the online travel agency, we know customers that travel globally, but they only have 3 to 4 days in a single destination. So how can we try the best restaurant and get the best food experience in different destinations? It's gonna be a problem. So, but there are too many restaurants, too many options in the world. If you check different apps, you can see over thousands of restaurants, maybe in Bangkok or the city like Beijing. But you have limited days. So we try to pick the best restaurant in different cities and give our customer the best choice. And how we do it? We try to separate the restaurant in 3 different levels. First one is the City Trip Star. You can compare it with Michelin Star. It's a top restaurant with a little bit expensive. The second one is City Trip Select. The City Trip Select is more affordable, but still with good quality. The third one is City Trip Flavor. And for this part, our customer really like this part because it will give you the authentic taste from the small restaurant. And it will also give you the suggestion which dish you need to try. So in 2017, we made the list of 120 cities, and we picked over 15,000 restaurants globally. And to make the list fair, we recruit over 20,000 gourmet hunters globally. And tell you the truth, we really pay them to test the restaurant. So I think it's a good job for if you guys really like food, you can give me some application to be our gourmet hunters. And we try to build the community more fair and public. So we have 17 community members. Most of them are real food professionals. We also have some celebrities, also some famous chefs, and we recruit 500 professional judges globally to give us some third-party reviews, and also our largest group of gourmet hunters. And so how we do it? we cannot test all the restaurants globally. That's not possible, and we don't have that much money. So we're gonna fresh our big data to get the list, send it to our food hunters to nominate. And after they try the restaurant, they're gonna send it back to us with the photo, with the reviews, and we have a panel to discuss. And after we get a temporary list, we send it to our committee. Our committee members have the power to delete anyone from the list. And after that, we're gonna public the list to public for almost a month and get the review and to see if our customer like it. And after a month, we're gonna send our awarding badge to our the restaurant on our list. So here's all the process. And why we are doing that? And are we trying to make some money from it? Totally not. Our founder said Ctrip has never intended to make money through Ctrip Gourmet List. And all we want to do is to select the best restaurant in the world and recommend them to more and more people. From last year and the year before last year, we made a lot merge and acquisition. And for right now, you can only find the Ctrip Gourmet on Ctrip main app, which is for the Chinese customer. But for next year, you can also find it our service on trip.com and Skyscanner. So if you guys have any questions, you can ask me later after the panel. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Well, how many of you know TripAdvisor? Put your hand up. The people that know TripAdvisor. Well, this is like 78.5% of the audience now. Joking, like nearly 3 or 4 of you know TripAdvisor, even if it's not 4 or 4. So maybe we can avoid the presentation of Mrs. Matthews. No, I'm joking. I think that Sarah Matthews, as the leader of the destination marketing sales team at TripAdvisor for Asia and Pacific region, and the work that she does to help the local hospitality businesses for better understanding the impact of digital on the business, and also thinking about the background that you have of 2 worlds that are represented here, the Western society and how we deal with these platforms, and also the experience in Asia would be very rich that you could share with us. So thank you so much to be here with us today.
Thank you. I hope everybody had a good lunch. I had a fantastic lunch, but I had to rush back here. So those of you who had dessert, tell me what it tasted like. I'm up for that job as official paid taster. I'm glad you all know TripAdvisor. I think what we're really here to talk about is ultimately how travel benefits all of us. When we travel, it's the one thing that we're not willing to cut down on spending. We always want to go on holiday. We want to have the best experience that we can have in that destination. Food is very much part of that experience. When we heard earlier today, food is really about sharing. You meet people through sharing of food. We all take real offense when someone doesn't like the meal you cooked for them or you took them out to a restaurant and they didn't like it. And it's because we connect through food. You heard Anita talk about food and the history of food and how that brings that story out. And I wanted to share with you really what my Facebook, Instagram looks like. I'm from Hong Kong. Those of you who know Hong Kong people know that we take a photograph. It has to be well lit before we're even allowed to eat it. So I struggle a lot of times when I eat my meals with my friends. But when we travel, we're taking on huge amounts of experiences. What you have to remember, though, when you think about food, is what is it that you know about that cuisine and that destination? And I would say that beyond TripAdvisor and tech, it also comes down to your DNA. For those of you who have never tried the amazing fruit durian, if you come from in Europe, you're going to think it's an interesting fruit. It's got a very special smell. And some of you will like it and some of you won't. But it's for people who grew up in Asia, that's just a piece of fruit. It's the famous joke when you go to somewhere and say, are you going to have Chinese food in China? Nah, it's just called food, right? And it's because all of us have our own different DNA, our own culture, our own history. But it plays such an important part to what we experience in the destination. I'm constantly posting photos of food. This was from my recent trip in South Korea, my dinner in Hong Kong the other night. And by the way, love tech and the new mobile phones. This is just done with my iPhone, nothing special. I'm not Ansel Adams here. My favorite Japanese pancakes, the size of the cream was bigger than the plate. My delicious fresh seafood in Samoa. So we look at all of these different types of cuisine, this food, and we're sharing constantly, which is what we're doing both on social, on platforms like Ctrip, on TripAdvisor, is we're sharing our stories. And that's really the history behind TripAdvisor, was that we were born out to inspire travelers, to help you decide where you should go, based on your interests and your intent. I'm planning a trip with my sister and her 3 kids to Japan. Food is not going to be the big criteria because you can give a 6-year-old anything and they're pretty much not going to complain. My sister, on the other hand, who's gluten-free and a vegetarian, I'm going to have to work some magic. But when we think about how we travel with different people on different occasions, changes the trip itself. What are we trying to achieve on that trip? And the site provides you with other users who are just like you. If I'm going on a weekend of food hunting in the markets of Singapore, then I'm going to want to read reviews about hawker stores, right? If I want to go and have an amazing meal from Flanders, where I used to work with Tourism Flanders, you can get some amazing meals out in Yper and Poperinge, for example. So that's about that sharing which we have on TripAdvisor. To give you some of the latest stats we have, I think what's more interesting is that our reviews are constantly growing. We're 630 million reviews and opinions online right now. We have 4.6 million restaurants listed on TripAdvisor, and 130 million traveler photos. Traveler photos, particularly when you think about food, is what makes you want to go. You look at someone who's taken a great shot of something, you're like, yes, I'm definitely booking a trip now. I'm going to have to go and try that pad thai. And so when the users are sharing that information, it's actually them telling you their journey, their story to that destination. When TripAdvisor really now, as we keep evolving, we're a little bit like the dinosaur in the travel space because we're 18 years old. With all of the content that travelers are posting online, we have 4.8 million, nearly 1 million attractions and experiences listed on TripAdvisor, including cooking experience, and over 2 million accommodations. What travelers are doing is showcasing their favorite things to do. You can't talk about travel without mobile technology. How many of you have a smartphone? Wow, anybody who doesn't have their hand up, either you're dozing because I'm boring, or we need to go shopping and buy you a smartphone. Everybody has one. You're all on your phone constantly. You wake up, the first thing you're doing, you're checking out content. The last thing you do before you go to bed is you're reading social media posts. And that's exactly what travelers are doing. They're sharing that information across the mobile space. When we talked a little earlier about mobile and how that's where people are in that path to purchase, mobile is where you're seeing huge amounts of people booking, planning their holidays, their experiences, as we talked about in that path to purchase. What we know from TripAdvisor is 79% of travelers will usually or always reference a review before going. I had to book a trip to Disney France, and I was trying to decide which restaurants I wanted to eat in, knowing that I wanted some good French food as opposed to just not so good Disney hot dogs. And so we ended up finding some really good advice from other parents who were able to give me, these are the restaurants you should go to. What we know, though, is the travelers on TripAdvisor are constantly evolving. 72% are looking for restaurants when they're in the destination. Every one of you who's an overseas traveler right now, after your program of the next 2 days, if you're staying on in Thailand, you're going to be searching, where can I go and eat? What's going to be good for me? We're also seeing the huge amounts of growth in terms of restaurants that you can now book, make a reservation on TripAdvisor. We've seen about a 43% growth. And restaurants who are very active online on TripAdvisor, that's updating their photos, making sure that their content is accurate, see a 24% increase in booking interest. And again, that's because you're engaged with the user, telling them the right story. So as we know, TripAdvisor is constantly evolving and how we're constantly providing content now to users. And it's really based on your interest. What have you looked at previously is what we're recommending. Very quickly, because I'm running out of time. I didn't think I'd have enough time, but anyways. Most trips are destination-led. No matter what we're thinking about, we're always thinking about where I'm going, what do I want to do in that destination, and how do I want to experience it. But culture, I bring this back to culture, is the one thing. We talked about Indonesian food and that amazing cultural experience when you're in Bali or you're in Jogja. It's because it's food and culture coming together. So I leave you with this. The image of food is extremely powerful. You all know this. So you can either have dinner with me and have this plate of food, probably not so much, or you can have something that's beautifully prepared and cooked to perfection for you. So on that note, I look forward to eating my way through Thailand, as I've already done many, many years beforehand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think all of us, we appreciate to see these beautiful food pictures now that before the lunch. I mean, our belly is full.
I deliberately designed that.
Thank you, Sarah. And the last not the least is Mr. David Fiedler. Mr. Fiedler leads the strategy and insights team at ICF Olson in Toronto, Canada. David provides direction and strategy for teams that have the role of the consumer as a hero of marketing ecosystem. David says that he tries to evangelize human-centered practices and asks companies to empathize with the wants and need of consumer to drive incremental growth. David, welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. So, you know, we talk a lot about innovation this morning and today, and a little secret is that innovation is almost never about big things. It's often about very small human notions that lead to these big ideals. So I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off really quickly and make this statement that we have amnesia, that we have forgotten what it's like to be human, that we are reliant on this technology and these phones and all of these things to drive things. But, you know, but what we actually do is we have to rely on our own human instincts. So I think that we have a human empathy deficit. You know, sometimes we're blinded by new technology. All of these companies had amazing apps and different technologies that were sure to revolutionize the world. But guess what? They're all now defunct. Sometimes we mistake insights for empathy. We choose to focus on millennials a lot. And you know, the fact that millennials love avocado toast isn't really empathy about folks. It's about trends and what they like to eat. You don't know the whole person. And frankly, in my business, which is advertising, I can't go 2 minutes without hearing the word millennial. But we shouldn't really be too hard on ourselves because there's a cultural empathy deficit as well. College students today are 40% less empathetic than they were 30 years ago. And narcissism has increased as quickly as obesity has since the 1980s. That's pretty incredible. It's the I generation. It's what can you do for me, and how am I special? And this is also another thing, is we have less common ground than we ever have before. This is about the United States over the last 15 years or so. And the blue is what represents, the black is what represents that common ground. So you can see as time moves on, that space gets less and less. And it really accounts for what you see happening in the US, and I do think it's also happening in other places. It's very common now. But the good news is we're waking up. I did some research and I found, I looked at what the search volume was for the word empathy. And you could see around 2010 it started to rise exponentially. And then to validate it, I looked at how often the New York Times mentioned the word empathy. And in 2010, again, you could see it rising very, very high. So, but I think it's just more than a trend, similar to beards. But beards, I think, are going to last long, I hope. I don't remember what I look like. I think the point is that our jobs are no longer about getting people to do what we want, that they're more about helping people do what they want. How do we get empathy back? And usually I'll get up and do a little dance break to Justin Timberlake, but I don't think anybody wants to see that. It's not a revolution, it's sort of an evolution. Like, how do we do this very iteratively and very slowly? So we need to reframe what empathy is from something that we have to something that you do. One of the things in Thailand that's just been so remarkable to me is that sincere warmth that I have felt, and empathy, and people listening and really just looking at me as a human and not just necessarily as a customer. So there's really three ways to practice empathy. The first way is to know people outside and in. It's really easy to say, oh, I could walk a mile in their shoes, but you also have to understand the context of their lives. You talked about that. Context is really important. Where I'm from, we have a holiday called Thanksgiving, and every year this is a holiday about feeling grateful and thanking people and just sort of sitting back and being appreciative of what you have. I don't live where my family is, so I volunteer every year at a food shelter and to pass out food. And what was remarkable to me was, oops, I went too far. I gave away my lead there. But what I found remarkable at this homeless shelter was that all of the folks were very picky about what we were giving them. No, I'll take this one. No, I don't want that one, I want that one. And at first we were all very like, what is going on? This is like such a huge deal. But if you think about the context of a homeless person, they don't have a lot of choice in their life. They don't know where they're going to sleep. They don't know all of these things. So it's really the only choice they have. And when we thought of it that way, we were happy to let them be as picky as they want because it just imparted a bit of happiness. The second way is really interesting, is knowing people better than they know themselves. So this is a famous quote, but Henry Ford once said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse. So you all know your business very well. You are able to observe people in your business in the context of how they do it. So imagine that. Put yourself in those shoes, and then how can you make it better? So give people what they want, when they want it, never before and never after. People like to chunk experiences out and to understand what they mean. We talk about those 4 segments of the customer journey. And then the third way is solve real problems for real people. So I don't know if any of you guys are into this, but which Game of Thrones hunk is your soulmate is probably not that important, and only 0.6% of 0.6% of people did this. That's 6 in 10,000 people. I don't know where else that's considered successful. So focus on things that matter. So this practice doesn't have to be complex. It really doesn't. Just ask yourself 3 simple things. Is 1, do I know the whole person? Do I understand their context? Do I understand them and have that empathy? Am I adding real value to what that context is and what their lives are? And would I do this? Would I really do this? Remember that you're a human first. You're not just a restaurant person. You're not a hotelier. You're people that work in these industries. Don't forget that you're a person. So one of my favorite philosophers in the entire world is a man named Buckminster Fuller. And just look at that guy. How can you not love him? But he said that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So I would leave you with this, is that technology is a tool, and we've heard this today. Humans are what use that tool, so use it as a tool instead of a panacea. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, this is my contact information, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, all of you, to adjust on the time. I really appreciate it. You make the things easier for the moderator.
You warned me. I got scared. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thanks to give David this vision that not only the machines are behind technology, right? I think it's quite balanced, stable. I think you did realize already that here we have super platforms sharing the round table with people is working from a human-centered way, but also we have here people that is working with small and medium enterprises giving technical solutions. It's interesting. I think it's a well starting point for the debate. So now we open the debate part of the round table, and we want to do it in the most easiest way possible. I think that to explain a good story, we need a good screenplay behind. And I would not like that you lose in the immensity of the debate. And I would like you just to follow a little bit, and this is what I asked to the speakers to follow too, this short screenplay, something that everyone could understand and already appear during the sessions that we have had today, which is that the process of building the tourism experience, the food tourism experience along the trip, someone says from end to end, but it's more or less the idea, the customer journey, things that happening before the trip, things that happening during the trip or on the trip, and then also things that happening after the trip. We're dreaming, we're planning, we said, we're booking, but also we're having this full 360 degrees experience. We are consuming the experience once we're in the destination. And also we have these memories, these remarkable memories that we want to share with someone that starts the process. So it's quite cycle process. So we will play in this frame, if you don't mind. And I would like to ask, starting asking a question based on that first stage of this long process or short process, which now it seems that everything is overlapping during, after, and before. And it's a question goes basically to the two big players we have today on the round table, C-Trip and Advisor. And to land, then the question is just to ask you, if perhaps, Sarah, this question is for you, how influent are the online reviews and recommendations in the decision-making to purchase a tourism experience, a food tourism experience?
So certainly having the review itself from the user is very powerful because, again, you're able to filter on TripAdvisor whether it's a family, you want to read a review about a family restaurant, or if you want to choose a gourmet restaurant. So I think the review is very important. What I would also say is that businesses can help themselves by telling a story. You talk about authenticity and that voice, or that empathy. One of the best business reviews I've ever read is a lady who runs a museum in England. She talks like a human, first of all. She uses words like yummy. One of the reviewers wrote that the bread pudding was very delicious. She said, yeah, our bread pudding is yummy. And she was able to give more story behind it. Because isn't that why we go and travel? If not, surely we would just go and eat at every chain restaurant and not bother. But we go because we want the story. Whether it's your own story or whether it's a story from the local restaurateur, the lady who makes a pad thai on the street. We want that story. So the owners themselves can share that when they respond to reviews. It doesn't need to be hard work. You can do it on your mobile phone. It's quicker than playing Candy Crush, in my opinion. So you can certainly sit down and take 5 minutes of your time. But what you want to be doing is telling the story of yourself, your authentic self, which is what makes a story. And so I would agree that tech is just the platform, but it doesn't change the ethos of travel. It's why we travel. So that's what I would say would be the first thing, and how influential that is. There's stats and stats galore. 79% for restaurants, 84% for attractions and experiences, 90% for hotels. So all reviews certainly do help, whether it's on TripAdvisor or Amazon.
And if I could add to that, really the point of marketing and advertising and content at this point is the circle, where in the past it was a funnel. So the point of all of this is to set an expectation. So when you set that expectation, set it based on something that you could meet or exceed, because things like TripAdvisor create what's called social validation. You have an instinct. It's something that validates you, because at the end of the day, I want to feel powerful and right and enjoy it. And that's what these things do, is they validate my id and my perspective. So, and really the only thing that you have that's differentiated is yourself as a provider.
But I would agree that
yeah.
you mustn't, you have to manage expectations. Right. There's nothing worse than going to a hotel or a restaurant and they've told you we're a 5-star, you come in a suit and everybody's in shorts and the food isn't that good. You've got to be honest, which is the key. What is it that you're really offering? And actually that makes a great experience in itself.
I think Stephen wants to add something.
There's an interesting stat that I read recently, and that was that YouTube experience videos have grown, viewership on those types of videos has grown 600% over the last 2 years. So people are actually, the nature of the reviews are very different now. Because of the advent of good quality video on smartphones, people are actually videoing themselves doing these experiences, whether it's in a restaurant or in the case of packaged products, the unboxing. I don't know if you've seen those, the unboxing video. So people are actually watching these things. They're going and they're watching these videos in order to help develop that expectation of the experience. So that's an interesting thing that I read recently. So
in your introduction, you have been focusing the idea of the data source based. You have your reviews. You companies, from this point of view, I guess between Ctrip and TripAdvisor, they have a lot of differences between you guys. One of the big differences that we see is the data source comes from different point. You're working from users generation content, and you work from professional generation content. From the client point of view, from the customer point of view, what is the validity? What's the point to understand and to trust from these two different point of view, from the different two data sources?
Well, I'd say for UCG, it's nobody's paying them to do it, right? But like with anything, it's like if I read a review on Amazon about whether or not I should buy this vacuum cleaner or that vacuum cleaner, I first of all have to define, what do I need this vacuum cleaner for? Do I have dogs? If I have a dog and I need to get a vacuum cleaner that will do the right things for pets. So it's always about you there's a lot of information out there, not only on TripAdvisor, across the whole wide world. Aren't we information inundated at times? But ultimately, what you're trying to do is sift through it to find what's right for me. So when I talked about that Disney experience, I wasn't looking at every single review. I particularly picked out reviews written by families who had gone in that particular period, stayed at the same hotel, and was reading where they were recommending where to eat. Because that was my base, right? So if I'm going shopping or if I'm going for a weekend away, I'm also going to be reading content, whether it's user-generated or any other content out there, but reading content that suits my needs, suits Sarah at this intent of travel. So that's probably what I would say. But surely you would go to multi-sources, right? That's the other thing with the web, is that we're across content everywhere, whether it's Wikipedia, whether it's search, trip, C-trip. You're consuming huge amounts to make that decision, right?
Gimme.
I would like to add something, because this is the problem with C-trip gourmet try to solve, because there are too many reviews in the world, and reviews from TripAdvisor and from a lot of different suppliers all around the world. But how do the customer know which one they should trust? So from this perspective, we try to get the real review from the local expert. So that's why we pick food hunters to give us the real restaurant reviews, and we send it out to different people who really need maybe the high-end restaurant or some affordable, or they just want to try something different. So I think that it's a main difference between UGC and the PGC.
It's what more or less we could compare with Airbnb with their ambassadors?
Yeah, similar.
Very similar. I would like to get in deeper about more specific questions about technology based in that part of the experience, where still the tourist is still thinking, stimulating, inspiring about the trip, about the food experience that we'll have. In that moment, and I would like to just to think, as many of you here in the audience are today, thinking how better I can learn the needs of these tourists, and what tools I have to get in this and deeper in this. And what I would like to ask you is how far we are with technology when we ask these questions: is where they are, how they are, when are they coming to my destination, how much they will spend in my destination or in my activity or in my tour. Because we in this digital transformation, we're passing from the completely blindness, just the ones that have powerful enough or money enough just to get budgets to do surveys, to get approximative picture about the tourist. We pass in a very fast track to understand and personalize any individual from millions of tourists. And your work, it's even part of this is just to get in deeper on that, understand better on this. So how far with technology are for people that is interested to personalize, to make a better marketing in this part of the trip? It's an open question for any of you.
Well, certainly on TripAdvisor, every business that's listed, we're a commercial organization. We have both a free and a paid listing. Everybody who gets listed, who lists themselves, or a traveler can write a listing. So if I go to a lady down the road who's serving a really nice pad thai and she's got a table, I can register her by writing a review. Everybody has a back end. They have to claim the listings, to take ownership, to respond to reviews. It will tell them who wrote a review, so where that traveler's from, the country. They will tell you what photo was the most clicked on that month. So there's quite a robust back end. So certainly the tech is there for them. I do a lot of training because my main work is with destinations across Asia Pacific. So we do a lot of training across most of the countries. With Indonesia, for example, we don't just do it in Jakarta. We go out quite far into the smaller destinations. And there I try and make it really bite-sized and say, look, instead of getting yourselves too far down the personalization, I think the first thing you have to establish is what you are as a business, and you can't be everything to everyone, right? If you're you make the best satay, then that's fine. You don't need to suddenly go and make pad thai. That's not your thing. And then identify who do you want to come? Who's your audience? And then once you've established that, then you can determine your bandwidth, right? If you're a one-man band, there's no point saying, well, I'm going to have a really robust social media strategy that's going to take this, 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 and this. That's just too much. So then you've got to use all of the tools out there to develop your social media profile and the relevant story that you're telling. So we do a lot of training to make sure it's not overly tech, but sadly the tech is there for them to delve into if they want to. But I always say the first thing is let's sort yourself out first and then get into that space.
Stephen.
I think
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I want to put a question, please.
Gentlemen,
Yes.
the questions on the debate, I
On
will
the
give
debate.
the floor later
Okay,
on
okay.
in the last part of the
Okay,
session.
I'm sorry then. Thank you.
I'll take note of your
Thank
interest.
you.
So
Thank you.
I'll just the first one to give the floor. Don't
Okay,
worry.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I think part of the challenge, especially when we talk about the SMEs and the small operators, and when I talk about food tourism, I'm not talking about the restaurants or the or the bars or the breweries or even things like that, but I'm talking about companies that do tours related around tourism, or related around food. So culinary tours, brewery tours, bar crawls even. I mean, there's all sorts of different activities around food. And I think part of the challenge is that most of those activities across the spectrum are not digital yet. It's very nascent for this space. So we're competing, from a technology standpoint, we're competing with paper and pen. That's what we're competing with. We're talking about bringing people from a very paper-based system into a digital system. You cannot personalize paper and pen. In order to personalize on that data has to exist. So we need to educate and bring these suppliers onto platforms so that their offerings, their experiences can actually be properly categorized and cataloged and shared, and then based on that, they can be personalized. But my other point with personalization as well is that with tours and activities, there's very little commoditization in tours and activities and food experiences in general. You could have 2 food tours in the same city. You could have 100 food tours in the same city, and they would all be different. You wouldn't be able to put them on a comparison chart like, on Amazon.com and go, well, this one's $50 and this one's $75, because the experience that you get with each of those different activities is going to be unique. And that's the beauty of tours and activities. So it's not necessarily about personalizing something that's generic for an individual, but it's finding the right fit out of the activities that exist for that individual. And so it's almost reverse personalization.
Yeah, but I mean, that's definitely what we're all looking for,
Yeah.
right? So, we were talking about this over lunch. I mean, the term luxury travel for me has totally evolved. There was a time when offering me a pillow menu was considered luxury. Luxury for me is I can put my flip-flops on and go to this tiny little Chiu Chow restaurant in the back streets of Hong Kong and have the best meal ever. And that for me is luxury because those types of restaurants don't exist and it suits me. So I think that's also changed. It's about the food. I did a great food tour experience in Samoa. And it was everything I wanted. I didn't want a huge group of people. I wasn't looking for something a bit generic. I wanted to know about the history. Actually, how did they farm this food? How did they get it from there to here? So But all of that does go into, as you showed earlier, 95% of people are searching content online. It means that small businesses and micro businesses really need to get help from government to understand this, what seemingly can be a complex space, to give them a really simple, here's what you do, go off and do this, and let's review. So it's not hard, but it's just giving them that streamlined entry point where it's not too hard for them to manage as well. Because we're talking about one-man bands here. These are people who, frankly, at the end of the day, they need to pay bills. They're not going to look at the tourism economy. They're looking at, can I put my kids through school? So there is an impact here that we need to be looking at.
David.
You know, and from a consumer point of view, there's a term called paralysis of choice, where you have too many options and you can't decide. And I think one of the things today that's the most of anything is that the way to separate yourself from that paralysis of choice as a restaurateur or a vendor is to be yourself. Because as a consumer, I am going to look for attributes that fit for me. And so if you look at data, a lot of data will drive people to the same conclusions and will make everything commoditized. So everything will end up looking the same and will feel the same things. So, you know, part of that is looking at that data, finding the gaps that you fit in. I hate the word authentic, because the second you say you're authentic, you're probably not. But when I say authentic, I mean authentic to who you are as a human and what your culture is and what, like, your individual culture. And, you know, those are the things that I respond to. The personality, not the personalization.
But the thing that's interesting about that has always been the case.
Yes, always.
That has never changed. Whether you used to go down to your baker's and ask for the type of bread that you wanted, or you now go to the supermarket and choose the bread that you want. Ultimately, it is about the real product for you.
Right.
And I think authenticity, and I agree, that word is flung about far too much, but also good hospitality. Tech doesn't change any of that. You still have to provide a good service for that customer, because if you think about it, especially in the context of food or food experiences, that person has come and eaten at your restaurant. You want them to leave rubbing their belly and in some cases giving you a juicy burp because they really enjoyed that meal, right?
Yeah, you know, and the thing about this circle that we keep talking about, instead of the funnel, is if you do these things authentically or in a real way, is it becomes a sustainable marketing program.
Yes.
So if you do it really well, you say what you are with truth, people come, they see that truth, and maybe you've even exceeded it, they tell their friends how great it was, and you get bigger and bigger and bigger. If you don't do it sort of well, you sort of stay the same. And if you do it really poorly, you get smaller and smaller, and suddenly you go pop and not exist anymore. And so really what is exciting about technology is it allows the truth to come much quicker, and that there's no single platform or technology that makes that easier for you. It makes it harder for you, actually. So
let's make another step. Let's now focus on the next stage. Now we have the tourists having the experience, right? Now we have the tourists sitting in restaurant, have the tourists enjoying a wonderful tour based on food gastronomy in the middle of Bangkok. We have a tourist visiting a farm. It's in that moment of the experience. Mobile is something that has been impacting a lot in the last 2 years. In Europe, for instance, the free roaming means a huge change for the behavior of the tourists meanwhile they are in the destination. Here, there are also two approaches of this. I see that some of you were working from this end-to-end, so it means to keep these tourists in your ecosystem. So it started with you guys booking in the pre-trip. It's with you during the trip, and hopefully will be you after the trip, the loyalty programs. But there are many SMEs that are working in the destination. They may have this chance of matching learning and artificial intelligence, and so they don't have access to the data to understand exactly what the client wants in the moment is having the experience. So how we can deal, Stephen, from this point of view, thinking about small and medium enterprises when they have the client there and how they play and access and let's say to communicate with the tourists meanwhile they have an experience in the destination.
Yeah, I think for most SMEs, the technological challenge is that there are very few tools for them, and the majority of bookings are done directly. So they're not getting the context, and they don't have the benefit of having mass amounts of customer data like with Ctrip and TripAdvisor and others, in order to use some of those new technologies. I mean, talk to a small operator about machine learning and AI and blockchain, and they'll just stare at you and think you're crazy, because it's not in their world, right? That's not what they understand. There's no impact. When you're only dealing with 5,000 customers a year or 10,000 customers a year, that's not enough customer data to really do anything meaningful with. So. For a small operator, that's where channels like Ctrip and TripAdvisor and Expedia can add value to the supply chain for them from a distribution standpoint, because they do have access to that mass amount of data. So they can do things like look at the data and be able to make recommendations for their customers to do experiences that where those customers may not have even found you. Right? So, but it's got to be a mix. It's got to be a mix of those different channels. So really it's about understanding that for a small business, those types of technologies are beyond their reach from probably their own technology, but certainly working with the larger partners like the Viator/TripAdvisor experiences or Ctrip or Expedia. Working with those partners gives them access to that technology from a distribution standpoint.
Can I just say as well, though, I mean, this is also not just necessarily, I think distribution comes obviously the next step, but it's also just, you're talking about providing the tools for the traveler who is experiencing your experience, the ability to share. I don't know if any of you saw that great film in the 90s called Wayne's World. I think it's the 90s. And he had a really good point. You tell your friends and they tell their friends, and it just passes around. There are two tours that I think of. One is a young guy, both from South Africa. One is a young guy who was doing township tours. He had no computer, no tech. Okay, this was pretty early on in the TripAdvisor days. And someone booked a tour through the hotel to do his tour, and they found the tour because someone had written a review about his tours. He now is running a successful township tours experience across South Africa in Cape Town and Durban. There's another guy who was taking tours from travelers in South Africa, predominantly Cape Town. All he did was he thought, I'm going to add Wi-Fi to 2 of my cars. He only had 2 cars at that time. And what that allowed was travelers who were driving from Cape Town down to Hermanus, which is incredibly beautiful, were taking photographs. This is before even Facebook Live came out. He then added GoPro on the top of his car because he could afford it. And all that did was that it was content sharing. So distribution is one thing, but really it's about content and content sharing that's really important. It's content marketing. And not all of it has to cost. It's just about making sure that you've established your social presence and then giving the tools to travelers. There are some businesses who say, I don't want to have Wi-Fi in my environment because it takes away from the experience. And I'm like, that's fine, but why don't you have it when they sit down for a coffee at the end of it so that they can share immediately? It's the same with airports. Airports that don't give you free Wi-Fi stop you from telling the world what you've just been doing for the last 3 days. So I'd say that would be the before the distribution. I mean, they go hand in hand, but you've got to think about that first.
One of the main problems that a lot of small and medium enterprises have that offer tours, gastronomy, a lot of tour guides. I guess that a lot of people that is working on that here in the audience today It's how to access to these platforms, because one of the first things that you ask to them to be there is instant booking, is to guarantee a fast answer, and many of them are struggling with this point, and they're seeing that the business is growing in Nepal and they're getting a bit disconnected. It could be applied also to many of destination management and marketing organizations, that they see that their trading count it's getting down, and that is not only in areas, many in different cities, because they got, not I won't say monopoly, but they got in some sense the control of ticketing and sales experience in the city, and now they see that these big platforms are covering these needs and this access, and they're bringing the on-demand with them. So I just would like to, from TripAdvisor or Ctrip, what is the conditions that you put to these little enterprises to access to this demand?
So there's a free listing that everybody can take. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles. We are a commercial company. There is a paid for listings, and if you're working with TripAdvisor Experiences or what was called Viator, it's a commission-based system.
Viator, for instance?
Sorry?
Viator, for instance, one of the...
Viator, yeah. So, yeah, it's a paid for, it's a commission system. I normally say to SMEs and micros, because I mainly work with micros and SMEs, is get online first, set your strategy up, determine who you want to talk to, who's going to be your audience, make sure that you've got the right product for the right audience that you want, get listed, whether it's on TripAdvisor, whoever, make sure that you've got your social media presence, and start doing that first. And then when you're ready and you're making some money, make sure you get the distribution channels, whether it's, again, TripAdvisor or whoever, but make sure you're getting those bookings, right? But it can't just be willy-nilly. And for me, it goes back to, for micro businesses, we have to give them tools, which is much more robust than just, hey, TripAdvisor, get listed. It's got to be you've got to help them. It's got to be easy for them to do. And so that's probably what I would say. And, you know, the trip that I did in Samoa, he's a young chef who's built his tours called Chef John's Tours. It's very good. And he basically started off literally just doing chef tours for some of his friends who came over from New Zealand. That's really how he started, right? But he made sure he had an authentic story, it was a real story, and it was quality. And that's always going to win.
Let's go to practical things. I hate to be in a queue when I go to a restaurant. I don't like to sit on a table which is next to toilets. I think it's very common with many of you. Ctrip is working on that. Yeah. Ctrip is trying to give solutions to the restaurant's business to improve, on one side, the experience in the restaurant, but also to increase the business for the own restaurant. Tell us a little bit of that.
Okay. Let me talk about the trend happening in China, because the technology improved really a lot in the last couple of years. Because for every single day, the common Chinese people like me, I only take my mobile phone with me, and I don't even have key cards to my room, because it's also, you know, you can open your door by password, and you don't need to take change. You don't need a wallet. You can pay with your phone. You can even pay it here through Alipay and WeChat in Bangkok, and it's amazing. It changed a lot. So when we talk about standing queue outside of a restaurant, we acquired a company who's providing that technology that we can book a restaurant before you go there, and even you can book your seat. Like in Shanghai, if you want to pick a restaurant close to the bond, you won't have the view, and through that technology, you can pick the seat close to the window, just like you pick your seat on the flight. So yeah. It really changed our life. And I talk about the queuing, and so the hot place get even hotter because a lot of people stand outside of the restaurant, and we are trying to provide a technology that you can take your number and you can just go anywhere you want, and we send you the notification through WeChat.
Like the butchery.
WeChat is the largest online
Like
online
the
talking
butchery
app.
number, and then
Yeah. And WeChat, the monthly active user of WeChat is over 1 billion. So almost every single Chinese have that app. So you can get notification of where you are and how many people before you. So and you can also pick which dish you want. You can pay with them. So actually, you don't need wallet in China. And we are trying to provide service globally. Maybe this year in Thailand, Southeast Asia, and next year maybe in Korea and Japan.
if you don't say, I will understand, but I would like to share a question about when you will get into the commercialization of tourism activities, because Ctrip is very focused on flights, it's focused on accommodation, and recently you opened a new application, it's Trip.com, right?
Yeah.
So in some sense, you're just bidding to open, also to cover this end-to-end trip?
Yeah, we are doing that right now. We want to build one single backbone through different apps like Skyscanner, Ctrip, and Trip.com, and also we have two large players in China. It's called Culinary and Yilong, and we also providing service to WeChat. And you can find all the service maybe by the end of this year.
It's curious how all of these big companies are trying to cover as much as they can the end-to-end, experience. From the tourists. We see Google covering different paths. So we see TripAdvisor doing the same, Ctrip doing the same. Let's keep the client, the own ecosystem. David, please.
So I'm going to be a bit discordant, and with all due respect, the value of waiting, we're coming for food. So the product then shifts from how long the wait is away from how good the food is. So the waiting period and the line to get in is a great indication that it's a great restaurant. So
I would disagree.
And
Great.
one thing I'd like to say, and this is that, and I also mean this with all due respect, is that you're shifting that ownership of your customer away from you to a major corporation. So I would urge great caution in these things, and please forgive me, but because I realize that anyway, but that's the thing. It's also a human notion something that is less available to me has more value. And you want your customers to pick you because of what you sell, not because of the price or how quickly you can get in the restaurant. I'm very passionate about this. Now, technology changes every single day, but there are human truths that don't change and have been true for centuries.
I think Stephen has something to say.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I disagree. Lineups don't always match up with quality of food. I know of a few places I've waited in line for food, and it's been pretty mediocre. So but the hype is there. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a certain cachet, I think, to the overall experience that people kind of expect. Let's just say the expectations did not meet the actual result. I think the other point that I want to make is that as far as the human interaction with the tours and activities and the food tourism in particular goes, is that food tourism is unique. The experiences are unique. And we can't apply the same logic to, for example, hotels, in terms of the commoditization of that product. It's unique and it's interesting and it's very, very fragmented. So the way that we approach technology with this space, I think, has to be very focused on the needs of the individual small businesses and the ability to engage with them and to enable them from the ground up. This is very much a grassroots technology evolution. It has to start at the bottom and it has to work its way up. It's not something that can be dictated from the top down, because it will, as far as I am concerned, and with the work that I've been doing in this space for 15 years, it won't work that way. It has to come from the bottom up.
Can I just say on that, it's not that I disagree. I think one of the things we have to remember, WeChat Pay, Alipay exists because China is unique. When you have 1 billion people, I mean, you used to go to the banks on Saturday and Sunday in China to queue up, yeah? Because there's just too many people. So the system itself was developed for that nationality, whereby my cousins who went back into China during the communist era, there was a long time where things were not that easy for them. They had to wait outside the friendship store whilst we went shopping because I was holding a British passport. I think there's a cultural difference there, which is why their needs are so different. The fastest growing market in the world right now is India. How many of you are ready for the Indian traveler? They are vastly different to the Chinese traveler. Their food experiences are very different. Many people don't understand the full implications of their religious needs. So, Japan's a perfect example. I took one of my team members to Japan, and I think I spent the whole time feeding him bread because he didn't want to eat any of the sashimi because it was so, again, going back to our original DNA, it was so foreign. It's like the first time I had cheese. I grew up in Hong Kong. Kraft singles was what I determined as cheese. I know the Europeans in this room are going, oh my goodness. But yeah, I grew up in Hong Kong. That was good quality cheese. And then I went to Switzerland and they gave me the cheese. And I thought, wow, this is really smelly. But my father loved it. And so I would just remind you all that ultimately, you're all individuals, you all have your cultural DNA, and you're traveling to experience all of those things. But there are differences between, and I think China's a very odd example, because we don't have a version of WeChat Pay for, say, Americans, so you have Apple Pay, it hasn't gotten to where it needs to get to. I think that's because 1 billion really changes the dynamics of the country. That's the only thing I was saying.
We actually in China, we don't have a standard credit card system. So actually, we use cash, and we jump over the era of credit card, and we use mobile payment.
Yeah.
So,
I used to pay rent in my Beijing flat like this. I used to bring cash like this, 100 renminbi stacks.
Yeah, but now you don't need cash. You don't need a wallet. My wife got me a wallet. I never used it. Yeah.
Don't tell LV that.
She's not.
I think it's time to open the questions from the floor. So I guess there are some questions. There was a gentleman there that interrupted before. It's not there anymore. Perhaps the answer was answered. The question was already answered, knowing. Okay. The one just. Yes, sir. Please, I think you have to get closer to the microphone here.
Hi. Thank you for such an inspirational insight to experiences and food tourism. Absolutely fantastic. I've got a question to all of the panel. Excuse me. Sorry. It's all right.
Mario.
Go.
If you were to come back to this conference in 5 years' time, to the 9th forum, what would be the one thing that you would say that would be different from what you've just said?
I would say that it would be wonderful to see more travelers experiencing lesser-known destinations in Thailand, experiencing local communities, local food experiences, and really dispersing. That's what I would love to come back and see myself.
From a technology standpoint, I would love to come back in 5 years and not have paper and pencil be the predominant technology for management of these small businesses.
I want to put, yes, my name is...
Did you finish?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm coming from Belgium, and I'm a Michelin star chef, 2 stars. 50 years I stay in the kitchen, and I want to put a question on Mr. Liu. You told in your expose that the stars that you give are equal or a little bit equal than the Michelin stars. And then you tell that you go once, visit a restaurant, and then you take the relevé of the border from the gentleman or the lady that was going there dinner, and you take it to your staff, and then you make the decision, you can delete or you can accept it. How you only one times to the same restaurants, or you go many times?
I'm sorry, I didn't get your point.
Could you just repeat the last part? When you
I
focus there?
want to know if you go one time to a restaurant before you give a star or 2 stars or 3 stars, or if you go many times, visit the same restaurant before you make the judgment to give them a star or not.
Okay. It's about the review. It's about
Yes,
how to
about the
qualify
review.
Process.
Yeah,
Yes.
Your validation
it's,
process.
I mean, it's complicated because the restaurant we pick is reviewed by our gourmet hunter, and most of them come from the local, and
From
they
the
live
local.
there. Yeah, they live there,
Yeah.
but they live there, so they get the first hand of which restaurant is good, not just from a tourism perspective.
No. If you go, just only make your deal because the locals tell you that you must go to this place and not to another place. How you can be sure that if you don't go yourself or somebody of your staff or somebody from your food experience, don't go over there, how you can be sure that you make a right decision? Because I want to tell you something, all the people from Michelin, I got many years restaurants with Michelin stars. I have seen the people from Michelin more than 100 times in my place before I was knowing that they are there. You know, that's what I want to know. They don't go over a one-night stand to just that you are a star chef or not a star chef.
I think it's that gives enough debate to open a round table about reputation, or the reputation between what we call the collective intelligence, so millions of opinions of someone that you don't know, or on the other side, Michelin stars or guides where there are professionals, individuals, few of them, giving a professionalized opinion about what they are testing. So I think that could give us, on our round table to talk about that.
That I don't understand why he compare the stars that he want to give in China or somewhere else with the Michelin stars. This is a total different story, you know?
I think we got it. I think we got
Okay.
it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I totally understand because the Michelin guide in China is a disaster. Seriously. Yeah, and none of the Chinese they trust the Michelin guide in China, just like your situation. It happens. So.
Let's go to the other side of the room.
Can I just ask the gentleman, where's your restaurant?
Sorry?
Where's the restaurant? You said Belgium.
Yeah, he wants to localize you in Belgium.
Where?
No commercial.
The restaurant was restaurant Eddie van Malen, just in Brussels, madam. And I have there 35 years a restaurant and 10 years a school for young guys. And I just want to tell you, I have 13 students for me that are in the star world of the Michelin.
I was
Thank you,
just
madam.
going to say, because I love, when I worked for Flanders, I loved the food there.
Yes.
Best food.
Thank you very much, both of you. Right on the other side, on a question.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Imtiaz Maqbul from Travel Impact Newswire in Bangkok. I have one question for all the panelists and one specific question for Ms. Matthews. We heard this morning about campaigns to curb food waste and promote organic tourism. I'd be very keen to know what the techie companies are doing to advance this cause, the whole Sustainable Development Goals. I'd like to hear that from all the panelists. And one question specifically for Ms. Matthews. Sarah, this morning we heard that one of the top-rated restaurants in London on TripAdvisor did not actually exist. How did that fall through the cracks of your check and balance mechanisms? I'd be very keen to know the story behind that and what you're doing to actually prevent it from happening in other destinations.
Okay,
Thank you.
just to put in, thank you very much. To put in order the questions. First question would be answer for Stephen. The one, I think it's not a very original question because I think you've been asking discussing a lot. So let's see the answer.
Yeah.
Please.
Sustainability is, I mean, from a technology platform or a software platform, we're very supplier-centric. So we are very much focused on enabling the small business, the SME. So our approach to sustainability is give the small business in the destination the tools to be able to do business with a larger audience and be able to process those payments for themselves, be able to keep that money, and be able to have that money in their destination. So when we, when in the earlier panel, when they were talking about 20% of the actual revenue staying in the destination, our goal is to keep 95% of that money in destination by having the small operator actually be able to do business the way that they need to. It doesnst answer the food waste thing because that's kind of beyond our scope. But
I must remind you that in food wasting and things, there is another roundtable during these days that will focus on the economic impact. So I guess that, and there's the one, sustainability and social impact. So I think it would be interesting to leave some of the subjects that we will deal in this roundtable for the right one.
The shed.
the shed.
Thank you, MTS. Yeah, I mean, we get 260 pieces of content per minute. So certainly that was someone who was trying to circumvent the system. Most of our users don't try and do that. We eventually caught it. And that's what the community site is for. It was built for that purpose. If you have ever sort of spent any time across TripAdvisor, you'll see that across everything there's a report button. I myself have done it. A traveler posted a photograph of a gorilla in Fiji, and there are no gorillas in Fiji. So, I was able to report that and say, this is the wrong photo. So the system is out there. It is being used. TripAdvisor takes it very seriously. We have a very robust system, which I'm happy to share more details with you on. But yeah, it was one of those ones that someone tried to, play around with the system a bit.
Thanks for the answer.
Can I just say also, just on the sustainable goals, I agree. Certainly from what TripAdvisor's been doing in the US and in Europe, we've got our Green Leaders program for the hotel side. In terms of businesses in Asia Pacific, my role has been to work with governments to help SMEs and micros, which is why we don't just do training in the major cities. We go as far as we can to as small a village as we need to help those businesses understand what they need to do. I mean, it's a full-day training that we offer.
Again, we stop with educational and training programs.
Yeah, and look, the education isn't
education
just,
appears now and then.
It is, and I don't spend the whole time talking about TripAdvisor. And we talk a lot about strategy and what you should be doing in that space, and how do you build a robust business, which ultimately is sustainable.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have too much time. Just the last question here. You have a microphone just behind there? Then it's two last questions.
Okay,
you
two
first
last questions.
And Mrs. Pandos later.
It's quite easy because some of the questions already have been asked.
Answered.
Yeah, well, answered, no, that's like, I cannot say that, but the shed was one of the questions, right? How do you handle with fake reviews? Because it happens, okay, somebody wanted to prove, say we can crack the system, but fake reviews is part of an ugly practice within the business. So my first question was, okay, you were talking about 3% of OTA, since we're talking about tourism, technology, and marketing. It was, in the presentation, it was a figure given by Google. So it doesn't take into account the Chinese market.
No.
I was very curious to know what does OTA represents within the Chinese market.
I would defer to my friend from C-Trip to answer that question. Since you own the Chinese market.
We're very lucky to have experts in each market. So, Kimi.
I mean, it's a small number, yeah, but we didn't count it, but it's still a small number. So.
No, because it's, we believe, in my sector, we believe that this is really the future, the OTAs, and then next to you, you have TripAdvisor, which is also Expedia, if I'm not...
No.
Okay, maybe that's been passed. Okay, that's history.
Yeah.
So, yeah, actually that was my major questions because Yeah, and what are the criteria for your judges? So for your food hunters, how do you find them, or do they apply?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because because right now Citrus Gourmet is serving because most of our customers are Chinese, so we try to find the food hunter. Maybe about 90% or 80% they are Chinese, and they live outside of China. Like for example, in Bangkok we have some reviewers. They have lived here for over 20 years. So we try to find them through social media, and from some friend recommendation, because they also have a group. I mean, for the professional foodie, they almost know each other globally, because they travel from Hong Kong to Shanghai and to New York. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Last question, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can also send me an email if you want to try.
Hi, good afternoon. More than a question, I'm just going to share a story that I think is going to be very relevant to what we'll be talking about.
Briefly, please.
Very briefly. You know that I come from Spain. We are working very hard on smart cities and now smart tourism. And the digitization of SMEs and micro companies has been the missing link of the tourism sector. So one of the things that are on the table right now is a way to do that on a grand scale, or using a shared service platform to digitize thousands of micro companies at the same time with one technology, with one effort. I don't know if it's going to go through because it's digital agenda, but I think it's a very interesting approach to this problem that I think is shared by most destinations and most countries in the world. And not only to help the promotion or integrate that with, for example, with reputation as a TripAdvisor, to get intelligence, but also during the trip, with all the deployment of sensors on the territory with IoT, you could be sending push notifications to your clients all the time and telling them this, for example, this is the pad thai over here has the best reviews on TripAdvisor in the city, or this or that. And you could be increasing the spending levels at the destination with that. So I think that's still is not happening, but I think it's going to be on the table in the next year or two. And I thought, since we were talking about that it would be very interesting to share.
Just to say that we do push notification already on TripAdvisor.
Yeah,
so when you go to a district, it'll say, are you hungry, or do you want to do something? And we are looking to continually evolve that. But again, it's up to the users.
But the business needs to be online. It has to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this complimentary comment. Very interesting for reflection on the debate. This is the last part of the trip. We finished this trip that we started with before, during, and after. And the only thing I have to say to you, Stephen, Kimi, Sarah, and David, thank you very much. I think they deserve a big applause, right? Thank you.